excited to this week talk about IT profession. And I think it's a pretty broad space, and we have two different speakers. If each of you would be willing to share just name, where you went to school, major, and then your role today, that'd be great to get started. And then we'll have some more conversation from there. And we tend to just do this popcorn style, so whoever wants to go first, no need to be calling on names.
Sounds good. I'll start first. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here today. My name is Maier. I am currently a software engineer, currently going to be a senior software engineer next month, so looking forward to that. I'm at Patterson Companies. I went to the U of M, in Twin Cities U of M. I studied mathematics and biomedical engineering. Went to high school in Como Park, so let me shout out to any St. Paul students here. That's about it. I've been in my career for 2.5 years. I did do a career shift from process engineering into tech about 2.5 years ago. So,
thank you.
My name is Yi Lee. I am also from St. Paul. Shout out to any Harding graduates. I majored in electrical engineering at University of Minnesota. Let's see, I'm currently a software engineer at Target.
Excellent. Thank you both. I love the St. Paul East Side representation. I'm living in St. Paul, so always good to be on that side of the fence. So we talked a little bit about the fact that you both, it sounds like, have changed majors. How did you land in the roles you're in? Was it something you knew you wanted to be doing? Or how did that come about?
for me, it was something I initially had interest in. I've always wanted to learn how to build a website. What's this tech that everyone's talking about? But in college, studying mathematics and more of biomedical engineering, I wasn't exposed to that at all. So I don't have a formal educational background in tech. I learned that through a boot camp in Minneapolis, Prime Digital Academy, and it is all self-taught. So looking back, that transition, I think a lot of what I learned in college aided in my transition to my career today, but it wasn't inclusively, you don't need that educational background to get a job in IT, I would say.
Yeah, for me, I started out as an electrical engineer, and then with electrical engineering, it's kind of intertwined with software, because there's a middle ground called firmware engineering. That's what I was doing initially, which is more like your Arduino or Raspberry Pi stuff. But then at that super low level, and I was just tired of it. It's just the development cycles are very long, and it's very like political, I would say, for like firmware engineering. So I wanted to try something new and do something different on a higher level. So like I wanted to do more like machine learning and distributed systems and like web apps. And I was like, let's shoot for it. And I hopped around. Well, I didn't hop around, but I went more into software, and then I taught everything. I've learned everything by myself pretty much in the software engineering world, because my major in college was, even though it's electrical engineering, it's I was doing power electronics, which is completely different from software engineering. But there was some like overlap, but everything else was just grinding at home, months and months of just grinding. And I got here today.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like IT and this whole space is just so much more, I would say, like future oriented. When you talk about, machine learning and coding and these different topics, and especially even just boot camp for education, would you mind sharing more about like what your college experience was like? Because I feel like it differs a little bit from other majors. Whoever would like to go first.
Yeah, I could go first. Doing college, I think I was a lot heads down into theory-based learning, having like a degree in mathematics and like fundamental engineering. You learn all these fundamentals of sciences, And you pick all that up a lot. I think what was important to recognize at that time is all these theories can be applied to the real world, but in very specific and different ways. And so in college, I think I thought a lot about what I wanted to do in my career, and it was difficult to be able to see that, okay, I love math, I know these theories, but it was hard to find a job that you can use it every day. If you don't use calculus in your everyday job, um, kind of typical engineering job, you don't use calculus, and so that was hard for me to understand at college. But I think doing college, having that fundamentals, having those that background definitely do help me in my career today in terms of understanding how to learn and understanding how to break problems apart into tiny steps that you can still solve, because I think learning that in college still applies today in my job.
Yeah, picking back on that, like I feel like college was a very theoretical experience, like what Meyer had said, but it did help build that the fundamental skills of critical thinking, you know, and I think that's really important because, like Meyer said, in software engineering or in IT, it's really just breaking up big problems into much smaller ones that are solvable, and then you build up on that as a foundation. So I think that the structure of our majors, which is more, you know, it wasn't really hands-on physical, but the theory behind it, like all the calc stuff, it's still relevant today. Even like I was fortunate enough to be one of those who actually could use the calc stuff for like electrical engineering purposes, for like, you know, capacitors and stuff, which is different, but still I really think that building the fundamental skills of critical thinking and perseverance, like grit, that's what's going to make you go far.
To add to this, I think in college, a lot of my time, or a lot of the epiphanies I had, was all about self-growth and character development. And I think in college, if you start to understand where your passion is, what kind of career, what kind of life after college you would like to lead, I think that would be very helpful. Like they say in college, you don't learn the things to understand them fully, because it's years and years of science and math. You learn how to learn. You learn how to ask questions. You learn about how to ask the right questions. You learn about what kind of relationship you need to build and with who, so that you can kind of get yourself to where you want to be headed in your career.
I love that. Yeah, and I was gonna say, I feel like that dovetails into what I was curious about next. So you each talked about kind of, you learned theory in college, really focused on kind of critical thinking, grit, and had a lot of self-reflection. So once you were in school then and starting to explore like different professions after school, what were those professional experiences, whether it be, you know, internships or other things, that exposed you to what was next?
For me, after college, I didn't straight jump into a big job. During college, I spent 3 years in volunteering and then working in the Visible Heart Lab at the U of M. And during this time, I worked closely with Medtronic, or representative for Medtronic, and I saw how much red tape, how much things that got in the way of doing good quality work, or just doing research that was really, really hard to accomplish because you had that partnership with this big corporation. And so after college, I really wanted to do something that felt like I was giving back to the community. And so I joined this nonprofit called Catalyst Learning Center, and now am a director of that organization. I took it to a place where instead of offering math homework sheets, we offer tutoring services to students in the Minneapolis community, to students who otherwise don't have that access. And that was important because I felt like that aligned well with what I wanted to do in my career. I wanted to do something that would give back to the community in a way that it was meaningful to my value and the things I felt that was important. So I did that for a couple of years and then realized, hey, I love technology. I wanted to do software engineering. At that point, it was really hard because they say when I was looking for jobs, even though I had projects to back up, I have code that I've written. And the industry was in Minneapolis was saying, hey, you don't have experience, so we can't give you this entry level experience because you need a couple years of experience. And I thought that was the strangest thing, because entry level engineer, you don't need years of experience, or you don't need a year at least. And so with that, I began networking with the community and then navigating that space to understand, hey, how can I play a part? How can I make this advantageous to my situation? That's when I switched over from my role at 3M to tech. Yeah.
For me, my journey was more cookie cutter. I was end of sophomore year, I had an internship at Baxter Gambro, which is a medical device company doing software testing. And then, because at that point I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I just got an internship, whatever I could get at. And then the year after that, I got an internship at my first job, which was technically electrical engineering intern at Emerson Network Power, like doing like server stuff or power supplies. And then that led me into my first job, which was firmware engineering at the same company, doing more not the electrical side, but the software side. And that's got me to exposure into the software world, but nothing that's most computer science know about, because it's more of a electrical / computer engineering job, since you need a mixture of both hardware and software. But with that, and then after that, I thought to myself, like, since I was a little kid, I was like, I'm gonna get my degree and then get an engineering job. I'm gonna be happy. That the end. You know, it never ends up that way. You know, you should always have a goal or a carrot in front of you to achieve more and be happier with, not just be content, but grow. You know, growth is really important. So I was content with myself for like 2 years. Then I went to St. Thomas for my master's. Initially, it was master's in electrical engineering because some company was paying for it. So I was like, sure, why not? And then as I got further into it, I was like, I don't really like these courses. They're really boring. It's very like undergrad again. It's a theoretical nonsense that, I mean, it's important, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't vibe with me. So I switched over to software engineering master's instead. And then I took some courses there. Again, it's really theoretical. It's like project management overall, less hands-on application stuff I wanted to do. Then I switched over again. I switched to data science master's because that was the hot topic, and it still is now. But as I took more of those classes, I felt like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Like the application stuff, the you know, like the hot dog not hot dog reference, if people know about that. Yeah, so like just keep on exploring, keep on having a goal in front of you, and like don't say no. Be open-minded and say what if. You know, that's my path and experience I've had.
I love it. Thank you. Both you each have shared a bit about just being self-taught versus, you know, a particular class that you were in, or like on-the-job training. So what are those aspects of like the work world that college didn't necessarily prepare you for?
I would say in my job today, you have a lot of software rituals like daily stand-ups. You kind of have a way of developing software that is culture-based that school didn't teach, but it's not something you need to know prior to the job. You can learn that on the job. I think something that school didn't teach or boot camp didn't teach is having the understanding of how to solve a problem with asking help from your team. I think when I first started, I would sit on a task for a while because I thought, oh, I needed to prove to my team that I can do this. I needed to figure this out on my own. Like that added validation to my role, but it wasn't like that at all. And a software development team, it's really a team. If you sit on something for more than 2 hours and you are still stuck on it, you should ask for help, because that's better than dragging the project down if you don't ask for help. So learning that too, and then what school didn't teach or the bootcamp didn't teach is the ability to network with professionals in the industry. I think that really played a role in my success in finding a job after school, because if you're able to connect with individuals so they can vouch for your character, for your skill set, it goes a long way than having a degree or a piece of paper. Because as I'm hiring junior engineers now, all the resume looks the same. But if I can get someone to say, hey, this person, I know this person, I worked with them on this one project, they're good, you should hire them, then I would consider them more. And so just being mindful about other things that can help you become successful in your early career outside of classes, I think that's important too.
I like it. And Yi, before you jump in, do you mind sharing a little more? What is a daily stand-up?
So a daily stand-up is, in a software team, depending on the type of team your team is organized, and daily stand-up is something where your team comes together, and if we were all in the office, maybe it would be a physical stand-up, but now we're all remote, so we all get to sit down. So you talk about what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and if you have any blockers. The idea of it is to keep accountability within the team, and then to also have a space for your team to come and say, hey, I'm having a problem on this. Can I get help on this? Or just like a daily check-in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was the question again? I was too into what my ear is saying.
You're totally good. So we were talking about, each of you have really demonstrated how much you've been like self-taught on top of just the experiences you had in college. What are each of those, experiences or aspects that college didn't prepare you for the work world?
Yeah. So what I think is important, like Meyer said, was like the software engineering aspect, which is the agile, the scrum, the kanban, the actual software engineering, which is you're not going to know everything. You need to work with the team. You have a team. You're only as fast as your slowest worker. So you need to help each other. It also didn't teach, like in college, it didn't teach me how to ask for help when I need it, because their TAs are there and stuff, but you're never really forced to use them. Here you have coworkers that you're going to interact with every day, and you're going to need help from them because you're new. In terms of entry level guys, you're new and you're learning. So like really open up your mind and be okay to feel dumb, if that makes sense. You're not dumb. Just be okay to that mindset. For technical aspect, since I consider myself self-taught practically, I think algorithms and data structures are really important if you're doing software engineering. It's you don't need to learn a specific language. It's the theory that can translate to any language. So I think that's really important that I didn't learn in college because I'm an electrical engineer major, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you each talk about all of these different acronyms, whether it's Scrum, Agile, and whatnot. I used to work at 3M in sourcing, and so I felt like that was already a company with a lot of acronyms. And then I sat at the peripheral of all these different more acronyms, and I always remember thinking like, am I agile? Like what? What are these things? And so I appreciate you sharing like just the willingness to not know the answer and then to be asking for help and gaining that from others. So you shared a little bit about students trying to stand out on resumes, and how, all resumes look the same. If I'm a student, in the field today, what can I be doing to position myself well for an opportunity?
So I guess if you don't have a LinkedIn, get yourself a LinkedIn. Add visibility there. If you want a coding job, create a GitHub, link your GitHub into your resume. I want to see code samples. That would help you stand out. Things like certifications shows that, hey, besides getting this degree, I'm spending my time learning these other things, doing these online classes. Certifications are nice too. And then also something that stand out is, does this candidate have like, to really judge passion, do they do other things besides what is regular? Do you go to meetups? Do you volunteer for meetups? Do you attend these organized conferences that talk about things? And so, like, or analyzing a candidate from those perspectives, I think the ones that we've hired definitely stood out in those areas.
Yeah, for my perspective, I definitely agree with everything Mayur said. The LinkedIn, the GitHub, the extracurricular, because when you're coming out of college, or even when you're in college, you're just another person amongst a really big pool. So how do you differentiate yourself? Join student groups. So with jobs, I mean, you're trying to get internships and jobs. There's two routes. One is every recruiter, when you get a job, when they go look for a person, the first thing they're gonna do is, okay, all the people I know who work for me or work with me, do you guys know anybody? It's always network first and then the pool. So if you know somebody, you're already way ahead of everybody else. So like networking is so important. And then if you don't meet that criteria, then fine, that's fine. There's still the pool. You can be a candidate in the pool. So how do you become a competitive candidate? You'll probably hear this every time, and it's like, oh yeah, you should, for speaking for software world, right? You should do open source or like make your own project, And it's true. It's even having your own page on GitHub and like designing that yourself, that sets you apart and say, okay, this guy at least knows some HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So that's more than half of these guys who just took these courses from the same college. Everyone else is the same. So, and I think what you do outside of work is really important too, because remember that you're going to be working with these guys for like 40 hours a week, so they want to make sure that they can work with you for 40 hours a week or more. That's really important. Is that I don't want to hire someone who's going to annoy me for 40 hours a week compared to someone who's going to be really like lively, bring culture. That's really important too. So extracurriculars are definitely important.
I love it. So we heard both about what we can be doing to like build up our content in terms of LinkedIn, code samples and whatnot, and then also networking. So, and the fact for our students on the line, we're networking with 2 professionals right now. So let's not forget that. For all the students on the line, if you have questions, feel free to either ask them or type them in the chat bar. Either are welcome. We definitely want to spend the next half hour hearing from you. And I'll kick it off with one more question, and then maybe we'll turn it over to students. Would each of you be willing to share like what a typical day in the life looks like, or a typical work week?
Definitely, I'll start. So my role is really unique in that my team is part of a big company, big organization, Fortune 500, but my team there's more of a startup-y feeling. And so I'm not boxed into the role of, hey, you have to code for 40 hours a week, because it's fairly small. I have a team of 6 developers, and then we have a product owner, someone who advocates for our priorities. I get to participate in things like organizing the backlog. So like going in and saying, hey, these are our priorities. Do they line up with the business? Do they line up with our developers? Do they line up with in the ways that the developers want to grow, or where the business want to go, or our objective for the year? And then I also get to talk to vendors. We work often with third-party companies, or we could do a lot of collaboration and then in the dental space. And so a lot of my week is spent having meetings and talking with vendors and checking in, and then right now I'm leading a development of a new API. And that's really exciting because then I get to be able to take it from scratch and to deliver it to our feature teams. And so that's really exciting. And besides that, yeah, you get your regular coding work that you have to do. But yeah, I guess a lot of meetings, one-on-ones. I spend about my time one-on-ones talking with my manager, talking with tech leads. And that's so important because you want to build relationship within your team and within higher ups than you, because you want them to be conscious of where you want to take your career. And so I tend to do that 2 hours a week. But besides that, it's tech in, meetings, and then coding.
Yeah, I don't have I mean, I work at Target with, it's just a big company, and their tech is really big. They have like a lot of teams, and we're converting from monolith to distributed systems, so distributed services. So I personally work on the gift card team. So my typical day, when I was in office, when I was in office, I would come in around 7. I was an early bird, and then come in at 7, grab Starbucks, and then go to my desk. And then before I open emails and everything, I would go look on the internet and browse up on news, like tech news or like business news, because I think it's like a really good time in the morning to just say, okay, work is work, but this is a good time to learn and grow right now. So I go look up like new technologies and whatever's coming up on like Hacker News. People should look at that if they want to keep up with what's going on. And then my stand up is usually around 9:15. So before 9:15, I just go and talk to my coworkers, like just conversate and ask how was their night, is anything interesting new? Because I think it's really important to build a team relationship. So I always do that every morning, and then have your 9:15 stand up for like 15 minutes, just exactly what we talked about earlier, just what's blocking, what are you working on, what are you going to do. And then, to be honest, it's so many meetings, which is like it's kind of bad because it makes us work more. I feel like I get less done because of all the meetings, but the times when I do get coding done is probably like right after lunch till like 4 is like my prime period where I can get like actual things done. Other times, because there's so many different teams, and for Target, there's like different teams with different services, and you always need to go talk to someone's service or something's being blocked because some team hasn't updated their API yet or something like that. So there's always a lot of communication going on. So in a bigger company, it's a little bit more political, I feel. It's not my favorite, but the culture is still really good. I feel like I do spend more time. I do spend more than 40 hours a week working, I feel, because of all the meetings, definitely. Um, and it's not all development. Software engineering, it's not like you just sit down and you start coding right away, right? There's a development process. You design first, and then after you design, you go and review your design to see if everyone says, oh, that's good. And then you go code. So when you code, you're following a design. It's not like you're just blindly coding. There's some people who are prodigies. I am not one of them. But that process takes like, for us, for my team, we have like a week and a half sprint. So it and a sprint is just a allotted time for you to complete your tasks. So I can go on and on, but that's like a typical day. and my schedule is kind of like that. But nowadays it's pretty much the same thing except no Starbucks, and I wake up a lot later now. 9:15 stand up and a 3 o'clock stand up because of the COVID thing.
Yeah, I appreciate each of you sharing. I think we're all anxious to just understand what a typical day looks like. I think I'm basing everything based on Silicon Valley, the TV show. So it's always nice to actually see behind the curtain what a typical day looks like. One of our questions, thank you, Luke, for asking about, have you ever felt that an assignment was completely out of scope of your ability? And how did you handle that situation?
I'll start with this. I feel like this almost every other day because I feel like as someone who's new to the industry, 2.5 years, that's nothing. There's still a lot to learn in my perspective. There's going to be like tasks assigned to you or responsibility given to you that you don't know anything about. But I think the most important thing is to have an aptitude for learning and to be honest about the expectation. I think when I take up tasks that I don't know anything about, I would say, hey, I don't know anything about this. I expect this to take me a while because I have to do some research. But I'm happy to tackle it because I think in software engineering or in tech, you need to have that mentality. Like if you like learning, if you like constantly learning new things, then I think you'll do well in tech. But when I'm faced with something like that, it's important to just communicate with your team, to communicate with the person that your product owner or someone that's responsible for the business delivery of your task, to keep them updated with where you're at, and to be transparent about, hey, if you need help or if you're blocked by any way. So I think opportunity, like when you are given something you don't know, think of it as an opportunity to learn instead of something that you to cause you stress or anything else.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Going back to my advice of you gotta keep your mind open. Feel like don't be afraid to look dumb. All right, because you're not gonna look dumb. What you're gonna look is courageous, and I face this every day. There's always a new task that I'm given. I'm like, oh shoot, like I gotta go and learn what that is. But the thing is, you tell everyone right away. It's like, all right, I'll take that task, but I don't know what that is. So like my ear said, like I need a few more days or a few more points to go and figure out what that is. And then usually, I mean, for me, all the time, like every time I've said this, everyone's like, yeah, no problem. Just let me know if you need any help or. So, first thing you do is go ask for help and go clarify what you need to do, right? And then, because like in software engineering in particular, and I'm pretty sure however you are the discipline, that scary task that you don't know how to do can be broken up to several small tasks, and then you solve that. So it's like, okay, step one, where do I even go find what this is? So it's just break it up to really small tasks, and it's achievable because you have your team. We have like for Target, we have like a gigantic Slack channel of all the engineers, and they have each like different topic. They have like Java, you have your frameworks, and they all have channels, and they'll have help channels where you can just like, hey, here, like, can you guys help me out? I'm stuck. Everyone is always willing to help. And don't forget Stack Overflow, because that's a lifesaver, which is the Bible for software engineering.
To add to that too, I think it's important to when you're job searching and when you're thinking about your career, is think about the culture of the company, the culture of the team that you want to be a part of. Do you want to? It happened a lot, like where you join a team and join a company, you're very excited, you're new, but you realize that it's not what you want because they're not open to helping. They're not open to mistakes. Like mistakes aren't celebrated. You can't so that's something that you should consider and ask a lot of questions about during the interview process. My first software engineering job was at a company that I shall not name, but it's on LinkedIn. And it was just terrible because you couldn't, they didn't have this mentality that you can make mistake as you knew. Deadlines were solid. They didn't understand anything. And so learning in a place like that was really hard. And so when you're given tasks like this, where you're like, you don't know anything about it, we need to get it done, it's near impossible. It's like they've set you up for failure. And so when you're interviewing, make sure you're conscious about this and ask questions to gauge the culture.
Plus one to that, definitely. It's really like culture is so important, and you don't realize that until you've gotten to like a couple of jobs. And it's like, wow, I did have a really bad experience at my last two jobs because they just weren't a good fit. So yeah, definitely.
Any advice on how a student, as either they're interviewing or going through that internship, on what are signals of positive culture, or what are red flags?
For me, during the interview, I was talking to the team and they didn't seem interested. They just didn't ask any question. I ended up asking all the questions, and then I took that job, but I was like, that was a red flag. So like noticing signs like that. I think asking about how the company makes their money, if they're making money, because if if they have a influx of cash, then they will invest that in their team. But if they don't, then maybe you don't want to go to a place that won't invest financially in your personal development. Other red flag is ask about flexibility. Like if you care about working remotely, if you care about taking time off to go to conferences, if you care about extra PTO, making sure you ask all those questions. And if they give you an answer where it doesn't align with what you want, then it's definitely a red flag. What I did too to help me gauge how the team works or how the company is I asked individuals on the team for coffee dates or informational interviews where you just go to a Starbucks or Caribou and you just talk about what they do on their job, like just like what we're doing over Zoom today, but with someone on their team to better understand, hey, how does this team work and do well I fit in. So it's not just them interviewing you. I think it's really important to really judge does the company, because your first couple of years are important for your growth, that if you are stuck in a place that won't promote that, then it's not worth those few years.
Yeah, I think Meyer really hit it on the nail there. You have to ask questions too, because it's a two-way street. You got to make sure that you want to fit in there and they can fill in for you. So like just a basic question like how's the culture like here? Everyone always asks that question. It's like, what do you do to invest back into your employees? So that's a really good question, because if they're like, oh yeah, we do birthdays every month, like, whoa, cool. Is that really what is that the best you can do? Is that the best that your company's culture can do? I've had those experiences where it's like, I mean, my first internship, the cultures, I mean, like medical devices in general, it's like very not the culture that fits me. Maybe some people, if you want to work your 40 hours, head down and then go home at the end of the day, that's perfect for you. That's fine. But for me, it's like, do we do happy hours? Do we do like Zoom games later? Like, can I, all of that is so important to me. So if you want to feel like it's like a second home, more like family, then you definitely should definitely always ask questions, because just because you got a job doesn't mean that you made it and you're going to like it. You have to ask to make sure that it's the right fit for you too. And don't be afraid to turn down jobs. I know that, times are tough, but it'll be tougher on you and more taxing on your mental health if their values don't align with yours. So definitely ask questions.
I love it. I feel like we are getting into real talk. Yeah, I feel like you each are in this space that have always been like on the leading edge of organizations or what the future of work looks like. You talked about even just the permission to ask for flexibility. Is that something students can be doing? How does that perceived, in an interview, or is that something you would recommend after you're on the job?
That's something I would recommend clarifying upfront. Like if that flexibility is important to you, you need to vocalize that. And if you find a place that agrees or a good fit, they would never have a problem with that, with you being flexible, taking like a day or two off or working off hours or working remotely from home. And in my team or my job now, because my past job wasn't like that, and I even though I've asked about it, and they said, yeah, we are flexible. It's never like that. It comes down to when you receive your package from HR, you really need to look at like how many vacation days they've offered you, and uh, talking to your hiring manager, like say if you work remotely Thursday and Friday, would they be okay with that? And you can kind of gauge that from the team, like because if the team already does things like that, then yeah, there will be no problem. If the team doesn't, then maybe it might not be a good fit. Um, yeah.
Yeah, like what Meyer said, I don't think you should uh, ask for forgiveness later. I think you should just be upfront about it. If you need to, if you're traveling from, you know, Wisconsin to Minnesota for internship, you want to do 4 days a week and then one day like remote because of your travel time. As long as like it's reasonable, and if they say no to you on that, then you might want to reconsider taking that job because your value doesn't align with theirs. So definitely be transparent about it upfront. That way you don't look bad and you don't cause any trouble for them and they don't cause any trouble for you in the future.
I love it. So a couple questions came in. First, we'll talk about what are the different trends you're seeing and technologies that students should be keeping an eye on?
For me, or for what I see is there's this burst of everybody wants to go to the cloud. So right now there's a huge need for Azure developers or AWS. Um, in my job, that's what we do. That's why they hire me because we want to move whatever they have on the desktop, whatever they have on-prem into the cloud. So there's been a wave of that. Infrastructure as code. I think in the past, the way the software was developed, software engineers are responsible for writing the code, and there's a separate team that's responsible for shipping, for making sure there's infrastructure to support it. Now, as a developer, you kind of have leeway into understanding that process. And so, in my job, it's my responsibility to take it from code into the cloud through the infrastructure. And so, learning that data science is hot, like data engineering. If you learn those stuff, you're guaranteed a job. You don't even have to do engineering. You just need to do database design or anything data. Right now, there's a huge need for that, especially in big corporation. So there's that trend too. If you want to do web development, I recommend JavaScript. That's the hot thing. Or Vue.js, look into that. Serverless is also a hot topic. There's a lot of keywords that I can throw at you. But yeah, those are just a few.
Yeah, piggyback on that. Keywords, DevOps. It's a hot topic, right? That will get you a job. Um, Data science, for data science, it's kind of like it's a really hot topic, and every company wants to use AI or machine learning, you know. But the reality with that is, for machine learning, you kind of need, I would say, a master's to PhD to really get into machine learning AI. Else, it's really competitive. For what was the question? Sorry. Trends in tech industry. Yeah, like Mayur said, cloud, like migration to cloud is really hot right now because everyone wants to use the cloud because it's a guaranteed safety, right? If you get if you lose data or something, it's not your fault. It'll be Google's or Amazon's fault. So, and if you can blame them and get something out of that, then that's really good. So I know a lot of companies locally here are switching from from their on-prem to cloud. Target itself, we use both we use Google Cloud, and we have like our own server farms in Minnesota, I know. So definitely DevOps, really big. Machine learning and stuff is really big as well. Data engineering, actually, specifically, is really, really hot, because that's where that DevOps and all that cloud migration is going, because you need to get data into that cloud. That's where the data engineering comes from, right? So, I mean, you guys can like message us, and I can like tell you what you want to do if you guys want to talk more about that. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, since it can go on forever. We can move on to the next question. Just message us on LinkedIn or whatever platform you guys want, and we can talk more about that later on if you guys want.
Yeah, if any students are looking to connect as well, we can send out emails, or if each of you are willing to put your email in the chat for students to connect with you, certainly something we can do as well. I know Brandon had another question. If you don't mind asking that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So my question was on the money aspect. When you mentioned money, my year, it made me think about, how do you go asking the company how they make money in a way that shows that you did do research? Because I don't know a way of how to ask the question that makes me, it's like, like one of the questions I asked for security teams, like, what are your thoughts on a data acquisition, or a company acquisition? And then they gave me like a little nonverbal facial expressions, like, what kind of question is that? And so it's like, how do you go about asking in a way where it shows that you really care and you're curious, but you're not incompetent?
Yeah, so I think what I would recommend is, yes, do your research before the interview. The company has a website. Go out there, look at it. There's employees who work at the company on LinkedIn. Search up those. Like, do your research online. There's so much information that you can learn. And then at the interview, maybe the question is more geared towards the hiring manager or their boss. Maybe if you get a vice president of engineering. So usually in companies, influx of money flows down from the top to the bottom. So your manager has a set amount of budget to use. Either it's to accomplish shipping out code, or paying your employees, or like there's a set amount of money that is always negotiated every year. And so asking a question in a way that you get insight into how that money is deviated can help you gain insight into, hey, if they prioritize your development, if you care about that, or if they prioritize paying your engineers higher. What I did is, because the company that I did interview at was fairly small, and I knew their product lines, I knew what they were selling, I knew their partners, who they were partnering with, and I knew what kind of products they're building in-house. The question I asked was, how do you make money with this software as a service? Like, how does this relationship work with other vendors? Like, asking questions to trigger insight into that you're curious about it, instead of like tell me what you do. Like, I feel like when you're asking people a question, if you bring them into the conversation, then they're less likely to have a negative reaction to your question. But I feel like money or finances is always a touchy topic, and especially if it's like your first interview, I don't recommend sharing like what your expected pay is, or like you just don't have that expectation, because you're still getting to know the company. But I think it's definitely okay to ask about where their money's going, where it's coming from, how do they make money as a company, so things like that. Or you can also, when you get on the job, there's something called, I don't remember, it's like account summary. It's like an account summary where, and maybe if it's a bigger corporation, there's a branch that has a document that says, hey, this is where we're spending money in the company. And then if you can ask for that, and then you can then align that with what is spent in your department. Like, that helps you better understand it. Does that answer the question, Brandon?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's really long-winded.
No, thank you. The concrete example of like what you said was very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to add a little bit to that, Brandon, it depends on what company you're asking too. Depends on if they're like a smaller startup or like a medium tier company that you don't know about it. But if it's like, if you're asking Amazon how do they make their money, how do it's going to be like, yeah, we sell stuff and we do AWS, but like knowing your customer and like asking those questions are great, but you should probably go deeper and know who's interviewing you and ask them how does your team impact the greater company's goals and vision, right? It's like, oh, I can answer that because here's how I know my team impacts the rest of the company and contributes to that.
I like it. Thank you. If there are any final questions from anyone, definitely want to make sure we're capturing that now. We have a couple minutes left. And then I also want to make sure we're saving time as well to hear just any final advice you would share for students, looking back on where you are now, anything you would have done differently, or just learnings that you have that you would suggest for students to be on top of.
I think there was a question about what tech we use in our job. I don't remember who asked it. I can share a little bit about that. So Patterson Company is a Azure or Microsoft shop, and so we code in C#. It's all C#, and then our application on the front end is JavaScript, and that's between React and Angular 9. And there's some Angular JS. So those are the techs that I play around in.
Yeah, for me, I wrote down my tech stack. So I do React for front end, and then Java and Kotlin for back end, and then some DevOps stuff with Docker, and then Drone for the continuous integration and development delivery, and then a lot of like internal target tools. There's the list is huge, but you only need to know this much to say you use it. But yeah, the list is huge. Feel free to DM us, and we can talk more about whatever questions you guys have.
Thank you. So yeah, if there's any kind of final general advice you would share, and thank you so much for also sharing contact information with everyone, because I think that's important, is not only in this moment getting prepared, but then when I do have that interview or that experience where I need insight, it's always important to have a professional in the space.
I can share some closing advice. I think what really helped propel my career in technology is finding mentors, finding sponsors, finding people who are going to advocate for you because they understand where you want to go with your career and what kind of things you need to learn, mainly because they've been in that career, they understand the kind of hurdles that you're facing. So find those people early in your career. Make sure you join a company that has individual like that. Something that I've greatly benefited from is going to meetups. Go to all these, if you're interested in technology, the Twin City has an amazing group of people who run these tech meetups. If you're new, you can come to MPLS Junior Devs. That's actually an organization that I run. We have monthly meetings. It mainly talks about, hey, here are these cool things, or just having a safe space to learn from each other. So I definitely recommend that. Go to meetups, meet people, and then find people who are going to help you. I think that definitely, more than knowing the technology or learning or doing the work, having that side really propelled my career. So I would say take a little bit of time to think about that.
My advice depends on where you are in the spectrum. So my advice to my peers, I would tell like my friends now, grind leak code. If you don't know what that is, you should figure what that is. You should know data structures and algorithms really well. Because if you're looking for an internship, like, to be honest, what they're gonna, like, all the recruiters, like, at the career fairs, what they're gonna do is, hey, is this kid a STEM major? Okay, what's his GPA? And they'll recruit on GPA and major, and importantly, what do you extracurriculars or anything impressive that makes you stand out different from everyone else? And that's like I'm looking at all the target interns now on their resumes, and they're all like, I have someone that's from like ACM, like the ACMW, like the women's ACM group. Like that's my intern. Like she's the president of the ACMW. It's like, whoa, this is a pretty impressive resume. And then there's another kid from Edina who is like really involved in the community, and it's like their resumes are like wow factor. Like what's your wow factor? You have to have that wow factor. And then you should also, I can't stress this enough, but know your data structures, algorithms, and object-oriented programming and design for internships. Because usually when they recruit, and they recruit hard for the recruiters, and during internship fairs, they'll ask you all those basic questions, like what is a class, what is an object, and you need to know those. So for internships, okay. But if you're trying to find an entry-level job, I have a different approach, which is more in depth. But networking is really important. That's number one thing. All right, guys, networking.
I love it. Yeah, I feel like we heard the teaser package, and if you want to hear more, we'll definitely have to be connecting with that. I just want to thank everyone for the time today. Specifically in this space, I feel like you guys are, the problem solvers, the innovators, and we, look to you for the future of work. So thank you so much. Definitely suggest everyone connecting with each of you on LinkedIn. We also have our Wallin Wisdom Project, which are great ways to connect with professionals. If you're interested in joining us next time, it'll be July 10th. We'll hear from human services, government, and nonprofit focus. And that is all we have for today. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Connect with us on LinkedIn if you guys want.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye.